I gave birth to twins. The nurse only brought me one baby. And when I told my husband, when I said there were two, I held them both. I felt both of them. I heard both of them cry. He looked at me with the specific, patient expression of someone managing a person who has lost their grip on reality. And he said, "What are you talking about? We only had one." I want you to understand what it is to be a woman who has just given birth. Your body has been through something enormous. You are exhausted in a way that has no civilian equivalent. You are on medication. You are in a hospital where everyone around you wears the same calm, authoritative clothing and speaks with the same measured confidence of people who know more than you about what is happening in your own body. And every single one of those people, the nurse, the doctor, your husband, the woman who comes to take your blood pressure, every single one of them is looking at you with the same expression, the expression that says, you are confused, you are overwrought, you are a new mother whose hormones and exhaustion have produced a belief that is not real. Except it was real. I had held her. I had felt her weight in my arms, different from her brother's weight, slightly lighter, with a different quality of cry, a higher pitch that I can still hear when the house is quiet. I had looked at her face. I had counted her fingers the way you count fingers automatically, the ancient parental inventory. She was real. She had existed, and now she was gone, and the world was telling me she had never been there, and I was alone in a hospital bed with one baby and the growing, nauseating understanding that something had been done to me that I did not yet have words for. If you are listening to this right now, stay with me. Stay with every word, because what I am about to tell you is not a story about a woman who was confused after childbirth. It is a story about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you are the architects of your loss, and about what one woman did when she decided that the world telling her she was crazy was not the same as actually being crazy. And before I go any further, tell me in the comments where you are listening from right now. Tell me if you have ever been told that what you experienced was not real by someone who knew that it was. Tell me where you are. I read every comment, everyone, because this story belongs to every person who has ever been gaslit by someone who had the power to make the lie stick. Stay with me. Every single word of this matters. My name is Saoirse Callahan Mwangi. I am 34 years old. My mother is Irish, from County Clare, the West Coast, the part of Ireland where the Atlantic comes in hard and the light is gray and beautiful, and the people have a specific quality of resilience that I always thought was geographical, something the landscape put into them, before I understood that resilience is always chosen, never given. My father is Kenyan, from Nairobi, the third of 6 children, a man who came to Ireland on an engineering scholarship and met my mother on a bus stop in a rainstorm and told her she looked like someone worth getting wet for, which my mother always said was the worst and best line she had ever heard. They gave me 2 countries and 2 languages, and a very specific understanding that the world is larger than the part of it you can see from where you are standing, and that this largeness is a reason for curiosity rather than fear. I grew up with 1 foot in County Clare and 1 foot in Nairobi, spending summers between both, learning that most of the things people use to divide themselves from each other are considerably less solid than they appear when you have family on both sides of the division. I trained as a midwife. I say this because it matters enormously to what comes later. I trained as a midwife. I worked as a midwife for 6 years. I have been present at more than 400 births, and I know with the specific knowledge of someone who has spent years on the other side of the delivery room exactly what happens when a woman gives birth to 2 babies. I know what twins look like. I know what twins feel like. I know the difference between a single delivery and a multiple birth from every angle of the room. I did not mistake a single baby for 2. I am not capable of that mistake. It is not possible for me to make that mistake. This is the foundation of everything else I am going to tell you. Please hold on to it. My name is Saoirse Callahan Mwangi. I am 34 years old. My mother is Irish, from County Clare, the West Coast, the part of Ireland where the Atlantic comes in hard and the light is grey and beautiful, and the people have a specific quality of resilience that I always thought was geographical, something the landscape put into them, before I understood that resilience is always chosen, never given. My father is Kenyan, from Nairobi, the third of 6 children, a man who came to Ireland on an engineering scholarship and met my mother on a bus stop in a rainstorm and told her she looked like someone worth getting wet for, which my mother always said was the worst and best line she had ever heard. They gave me 2 countries and 2 languages, and a very specific understanding that the world is larger than the part of it you can see from where you are standing, and that this largeness is a reason for curiosity rather than fear. I grew up with 1 foot in County Clare and 1 foot in Nairobi, spending summers between both, learning that most of the things people use to divide themselves from each other are considerably less solid than they appear when you have family on both sides of the division. I trained as a midwife. I say this because it matters enormously to what comes later. I trained as a midwife. I worked as a midwife for 6 years. I have been present at more than 400 births, and I know with the specific knowledge of someone who has spent years on the other side of the delivery room exactly what happens when a woman gives birth to 2 babies. I know what twins look like. I know what twins feel like. I know the difference between a single delivery and a multiple birth from every angle of the room. I did not mistake a single baby for 2. I am not capable of that mistake. It is not possible for me to make that mistake. This is the foundation of everything else I am going to tell you. Please hold on to it. My name is Saoirse Callahan Mwangi. I am 34 years old. My mother is Irish, from County Clare, the West Coast, the part of Ireland where the Atlantic comes in hard and the light is grey and beautiful, and the people have a specific quality of resilience that I always thought was geographical, something the landscape put into them, before I understood that resilience is always chosen, never given. My father is Kenyan, from Nairobi, the third of 6 children, a man who came to Ireland on an engineering scholarship and met my mother on a bus stop in a rainstorm and told her she looked like someone worth getting wet for, which my mother always said was the worst and best line she had ever heard. They gave me 2 countries and 2 languages, and a very specific understanding that the world is larger than the part of it you can see from where you are standing, and that this largeness is a reason for curiosity rather than fear. I grew up with 1 foot in County Clare and 1 foot in Nairobi, spending summers between both, learning that most of the things people use to divide themselves from each other are considerably less solid than they appear when you have family on both sides of the division. I trained as a midwife. I say this because it matters enormously to what comes later. I trained as a midwife. I worked as a midwife for 6 years. I have been present at more than 400 births, and I know with the specific knowledge of someone who has spent years on the other side of the delivery room exactly what happens when a woman gives birth to 2 babies. I know what twins look like. I know what twins feel like. I know the difference between a single delivery and a multiple birth from every angle of the room. I did not mistake a single baby for 2. I am not capable of that mistake. It is not possible for me to make that mistake. This is the foundation of everything else I am going to tell you. Please hold on to it. My name is Saoirse Callahan Mwangi. I am 34 years old. My mother is Irish, from County Clare, the West Coast, the part of Ireland where the Atlantic comes in hard and the light is grey and beautiful, and the people have a specific quality of resilience that I always thought was geographical, something the landscape put into them, before I understood that resilience is always chosen, never given. My father is Kenyan from Nairobi, the third of 6 children, a man who came to Ireland on an engineering scholarship and met my mother on a bus stop in a rainstorm and told her she looked like someone worth getting wet for, which my mother always said was the worst and best line she had ever heard. They gave me 2 countries and 2 languages, and a very specific understanding that the world is larger than the part of it you can see from where you are standing, and that this largeness is a reason for curiosity rather than fear. I grew up with 1 foot in County Clare and 1 foot in Nairobi, spending summers between both, learning that most of the things people use to divide themselves from each other are considerably less solid than they appear when you have family on both sides of the division. I trained as a midwife. I say this because it matters enormously to what comes later. I trained as a midwife. I worked as a midwife for 6 years. I have been present at more than 400 births, and I know with the specific knowledge of someone who has spent years on the other side of the delivery room.
Exactly what happens when a woman gives birth to 2 babies. I know what twins look like. I know what twins feel like. I know the difference between a single delivery and a multiple birth from every angle of the room. I did not mistake a single baby for 2. I am not capable of that mistake. It is not possible for me to make that mistake. This is the foundation of everything else I am going to tell you. Please hold on to it. I met David Mwangi at a medical conference in Dublin 7 years ago. He is a physician, a consultant in obstetrics and gynecology, which is relevant and which I will come back to. He was at the conference presenting a paper. He was smart and warm and had the specific quality of attention that I always find compelling, the kind that makes you feel fully in focus when you are talking to him, like a lens that has been adjusted until you are sharp. We spoke for 3 hours at the conference dinner and exchanged numbers, and were together within 2 months and married within 2 years. I was happy. I want to say that clearly and without the retrospective distortion that comes from knowing how the story develops. I was happy in the marriage. Not naively happy, I am not a naive person, but genuinely happy in the day-to-day reality of a shared life with someone I respected and trusted and found interesting and was comfortable with in the quiet, ordinary moments that constitute most of a life. We had a home. We had work we were both serious about. We had plans. We decided to have children in the 4th year of our marriage. It took time, more time than we hoped. 2 early losses that I will not describe in detail here because they belong to the private part of me, and because I think losses of that kind deserve to be held carefully rather than displayed. But we persisted, and 18 months after we began trying properly, I became pregnant. The pregnancy was closely monitored. David insisted on it, which I understood both as the concern of a husband and the specific anxiety of a physician who knows too many of the things that can go wrong. I was under the care of his colleague, a Dr. Harrington, a man I had met socially several times and found competent and unremarkable in the way of competent and unremarkable consultants. I trusted the care. I had no reason not to. The 12-week scan showed 2 heartbeats. I remember the sonographer's face, the slight widening of the eyes, the specific recalibration of someone who has found more than expected. She said, "Mrs. Mwangi, I'm seeing 2. She turned the screen. There they were, 2 distinct, unmistakable presences. 2 heartbeats at slightly different tempos, like 2 clocks in the same room set a few seconds apart. I cried, immediately and completely, without any effort to manage it. 2! We were going to have 2! All of the longing of the previous 18 months, all of the grief of the losses, all of the hope that had been careful and measured because we had learned to be careful with hope, all of it expanded in that room to accommodate 2 small heartbeats, and I was overwhelmed by it in the best possible way. David was with me. He held my hand. He looked at the screen. His expression was... I have tried many times since to read that expression in the memory of it. At the time, I read it as moved. I read it as a man receiving news that is restructuring his understanding of the future. I did not read anything else in it. I wish I had been able to. I was not. I began to prepare for twins. I told my mother. She cried down the phone from County Clare and said she was coming. She was absolutely coming. Nothing could stop her. I told my father. He laughed the enormous, delighted laugh of a man who finds the world's abundance genuinely surprising and wonderful. I began to set up the nursery for 2. I bought 2 of everything. I told my colleagues, I told my friends. I was so full of the future that I stopped examining the present as carefully as I otherwise might. The pregnancy progressed. The monitoring continued. Both babies grew. Both heartbeats remained. I saw them on screens many times in many configurations at many stages of their development. They were real. They existed for 37 weeks in my body, 2 distinct people sharing a space, and I knew them separately. I knew the movements of each one, the preferred positions, the different ways they pushed against me. A mother knows. A midwife knows. I knew.
And then I went into labor on a Tuesday morning in March. The hospital was one I knew professionally. I had done a placement there during my training. I knew the layout, I knew some of the staff, I knew the culture. This is relevant because it meant I was not the kind of patient who was disoriented by the environment. I was not confused by the machinery or the protocols or the specific organized intensity of a maternity ward. I was a midwife. I knew where I was and what was happening and what each stage meant. David drove me in at 5 in the morning. He was calm, the specific calm of a physician in a clinical setting, which I recognized and found reassuring. We were admitted. I was assessed. Labor was established and progressing. Dr. Harrington was called. A team assembled. I delivered the first baby at 9:47 in the morning, a boy. I will not use his name here for reasons I will explain as we go. He was placed on my chest, and he was warm and real and screaming with the magnificent, offended vigor of a human being arriving into the cold world with strong opinions about it. I held him. I counted his fingers. I kissed his head. I gave him back to the nurse when asked. And then, because I am a midwife, because I know the physiology of multiple delivery, because my body was telling me with complete clarity what was happening, the second labor began. This is the part I need you to understand absolutely. The second labor was not a confusion. It was not a misinterpretation of post-delivery cramping or medication effects or exhaustion. It was labor, contractions with the specific character of delivery, the rhythm, the intensity, the unmistakable quality of a body doing the work of bringing another person into the world. Dr. Harrington was still in the room. The team was still there. I said, "She's coming." And I delivered a second baby at 10:23 in the morning. A girl. She was smaller than her brother. She had a higher cry, that specific sound I told you about, the one I can still hear. She was placed, briefly, on my chest. I held her. I felt her weight. I looked at her face. I counted her fingers. And then a nurse I did not recognize took her to be assessed. What happened in the next 20 minutes is something I have reconstructed many times from the inside of memory because I was tired and emotionally overwhelmed, and some of the timeline has the slightly soft edges of a moment that was too large to process in real time. But what I know with the certainty of direct experience is that the man I was married to was looking at me with deliberate, constructed calm and telling me that my own experience was not real, and every person in that room was going to back him up. They moved me to a recovery room. I was given things, medication, I think, though I was careful about what I actually ingested versus what I allowed them to believe I had taken. This is where my training became its own form of protection. I knew what I was being given. I knew what its effects should be, and I knew the difference between those effects and what I was actually feeling. I was not sedated into confusion. I was tired and physically depleted, but my mind was clear, and it was working with the specific, focused clarity of a mind that had recognized danger and is prioritizing. I asked for my daughter 3 more times in the first hour. Each time, the response was a variation of the same theme: gentle, patient, concerned. A nurse said I had experienced a difficult delivery and it was natural to feel disoriented. Dr. Harrington, who came to check on me, said that twin births were sometimes imagined in the context of multiple pregnancy because the body and mind prepare for 2 and the psychological adjustment could be, he used the word, challenging. David sat in the chair beside my bed and held my hand and said he was worried about me and that I needed to rest. I rested. Visibly, I closed my eyes and I breathed slowly and I let them believe that I was doing what they wanted me to do. And behind my closed eyes, I was doing something else entirely. I was thinking systematically. I am a midwife. I have spent 6 years thinking systematically in high-pressure situations. I was listing in order what I knew for certain, what I suspected, and what I needed to find out. What I knew for certain: I had delivered 2 babies, a boy and a girl. The girl had been taken by a nurse I did not recognize and had not been returned. What I suspected: the disappearance of my daughter was not an accident or an error. The coordinated response, David, Dr. Harrington, the nursing staff, was too consistent, too immediate, too practiced to be improvised. This had been planned. What I needed to find out: where my daughter was, who had taken her, and who had authorized it. I kept my eyes closed, and I thought about the nurse who had taken her. I had seen her briefly in the specific distracted peripheral way of a woman who has just delivered a baby and is focused on the baby in her arms, but I had an impression, something to work with. Female, middle-aged, dark uniform that was slightly different from the standard ward uniform, not dramatically, but slightly. Not a regular staff member of that ward, someone who had come in specifically. And then I thought about something else: the layout of the hospital. I knew it, not perfectly, but well enough. The maternity ward was on the 3rd floor. There was a service corridor that connected to a secondary elevator. I knew this because I had used it during my placement. It was how the laundry was moved and certain deliveries to the ward or managed. It was not a public corridor. It had a door at the end that opened to a small external loading area at the side of the building. I looked through the small reinforced window. In the loading area below, a black car was parked. It was running. I could see the exhaust. And as I watched, a figure came out of the building, the side door below me, a door I had not known about, a door that was apparently accessible from somewhere in the hospital's lower levels. The figure was carrying something, a carry cot, the kind you use to transport a new baby. The figure got into the car. The car left. I stood at that window for a moment that I cannot accurately measure in time, and then I went back to my room. I got back into bed. I was there when the nurse returned. David came back an hour later. He had coffee from the hospital cafe in the paper cups I recognized. He was solicitous. He asked how I was feeling. He adjusted my pillow. He was performing, with complete fluency, the role of concerned husband. I performed the role of exhausted, slightly disoriented new mother. I have never been an actress, but I have spent 6 years learning to maintain composure in situations of high intensity, to keep my voice steady and my hands still when a delivery is going wrong, and I need the room to stay calm. I applied those skills now in a different direction. He put his jacket on the chair beside the bed. His phone was in the jacket pocket. I know this because I have spent 4 years watching him put his phone in his jacket pocket. It is where he always puts it, the specific habit of someone who wants his phone accessible but not visible, a habit I had never thought about before and was thinking about now with considerable attention. I waited until he went to the bathroom. I retrieved the phone. I knew his passcode. Couples know each other's passcodes. It is one of the small intimacies of shared life that you accumulate without noting them. I opened it. I did not have time to search. I went directly to messages, the most recent conversation at the top of the screen. The name? A number. No contact name, the kind of saved number that belongs to someone you do not want identifiably stored. The message thread? Recent, within the last 3 hours. The most recent message received while David was presumably getting coffee read, "The client is happy with the girl. The mother thinks she's insane. Clean." I read it once. I read it twice. I put the phone back in his jacket. I lay back in my bed. My son, in the hospital bassinet beside me, made the small sounds that newborns make in their sleep, the sighs and twitches of a person adjusting to the enormous novelty of existence. I looked at him. I thought, you had a sister. You had a sister, and she has been taken, and the man who is supposed to be your father is the person who arranged it. The client is happy with the girl. My daughter had been sold. I want to stop here and take a breath, not for drama, but because I need to say the next thing carefully. I know how this sounds. I know the categories this story is approaching, the things that people assume happen in other countries to other people in circumstances that are remote from ordinary life. I need you to understand that what I am telling you happened in a hospital, a registered, functioning, ostensibly regulated hospital, with a physician, with a consultant, with a nursing staff. This did not happen in a dark place. It happened in a brightly lit ward with equipment and protocols, and people in uniforms who had presumably taken oaths. It happened because the people who were supposed to provide safety were the ones manufacturing the danger. And it happened to a midwife, a woman who knew exactly what had occurred, which means it could be planned around, and which also means it had been planned around inadequately, because they had not counted on one thing: the specific, furious, utterly unshakable clarity of a mother who knows what she held. I thought about my mother in County Clare. I thought about my father in Nairobi. I thought about what both of them had told me in different words in different languages that amounted to the same instruction. When something is wrong, you do not wait for permission to fix it. You find your way to solid ground, and then you start pulling. I found solid ground in the form of my phone, which was in the drawer beside my bed, which David had not thought to take because he had not imagined that I was clear enough to use it. He was wrong. 27 minutes. I called my mother first. Not the police. Not yet, and I will explain why. Not yet, because I was in a hospital controlled by people who were part of this, and if I called the police from that room and the call was noticed before I had external support in place, I was a postpartum woman in a medical facility with a physician husband who could provide professional endorsement for any assessment of my mental state that was convenient for them. I needed someone outside the building who knew what I knew before I made any move that could be countered. My mother answered on the second ring. It was 11 in the morning. She said, "Saoirse, how are you? How is the baby? How are the babies?" I said, "Mom, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not react until I'm finished. Can you do that?" She said, in the voice my mother uses when she has understood that something is serious, the voice that is the opposite of panic, the voice that is all attention and stillness. She said, "I'm listening." I told her, all of it, quickly, quietly, with my back to the door and my son sleeping in his bassinet and the phone held close. She did not interrupt. She did not express doubt. She did not ask me if I was sure. She is my mother. She knows me. She has known me for 34 years, and she understood from the quality of my voice that this was not confusion, not medication, not the disorientation of a new mother. She understood that her daughter was telling her a true thing in a dangerous situation. When she finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted. Then she said, "I'm calling your father, and I'm calling your cousin Brendan. Brendan is a solicitor, family law in Dublin, sharp, thorough, the kind of person you want between you and a complicated situation. And then I'm getting in the car. Don't do anything else until you hear from Brendan. Do you understand?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Saoirse, I believe you." 3 words. I believe you.
I have been told many things in my life by many people who loved me, and those 3 words in that moment were the most important thing I had ever been told. They did not fix anything. My daughter was still in a black car going somewhere I did not know, but they put solid ground under my feet. They reminded me that I was not alone in knowing that I was sane. Brendan called me 14 minutes later. He had a voice like a closing argument, measured, precise, with the specific authority of someone who has learned that clarity is its own form of power. He asked me questions, what I had seen, what I had read on the phone, the name of the hospital, the names of the doctors, the time of the delivery, everything. He said, "Right, here is what is happening now." He told me he was contacting the Garda, the police in Ireland. He told me he was contacting a colleague who specialized in exactly this area. He used the words child trafficking without flinching, because Brendan does not flinch from accurate words. He told me not to let them discharge me, not to let them move me to a different part of the hospital, and under no circumstances to let David take my son anywhere. I said, "How long?" He said, 2 hours, maybe less. Can you hold? I thought about my daughter in a carry cot in a black car. I said, I can hold. I put the phone away. David came back into the room. He sat in his chair. He picked up his coffee. He looked at me with that managed, patient expression. I looked at him with the expression of a woman who was resting, and I held. The Garda arrived in 1 hour and 40 minutes, not to my room. Brendan had been specific about the approach, and the officers who responded had been briefed carefully. They came to the hospital administrator first. They had a warrant. Brendan had moved with a speed I still find remarkable when I think about it, calling in every resource, every connection, every expedited process available to a solicitor who understood exactly what kind of clock was running. I knew they were in the building before they reached my room because I felt it, not literally, but in the way that a ward changes when something official is happening in it. A subtle shift in the energy of the corridor, footsteps with a different character, voices pitched differently. David's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Something changed in his face, not dramatically, not a collapse, but a tightening, the specific tightening of someone who has received information that the plan had encountered an obstacle. He stood up. He said he needed to make a call. He moved toward the door. A Garda officer was already in the doorway. David said, "Excuse me." The officer said, "Dr. Mwangi, my name is Detective Sergeant Cayley. I need you to stay in this room." What happened in the next 30 minutes is partly procedural and partly personal, and I will try to tell you both. Procedurally, David was detained for questioning. Dr. Harrington was located in the hospital and detained separately, crucial because separating them immediately prevented the coordination of whatever account they had prepared. The nursing staff were interviewed. The message on David's phone, which the Garda were able to access through the warrant, was confirmed and preserved as evidence. And the black car. The black car was the thread that, when pulled, began to unravel the rest of it. The hospital had external CCTV. The car was on it. The plate was traceable. Brendan's colleague, the specialist, a woman named Dr. Owifa Dunn, who works with Interpol-connected networks addressing exactly this category of crime, had people looking for that car before the Garda had finished their first interview. I will not tell you everything about what they found, because the investigation is ongoing, and there are people who have not yet been charged who would benefit from me saying less than I know. What I will tell you is the thing that matters most. They found her. She was found in a property 38 kilometers from the hospital, 8 hours after she had been taken. She had not yet left the country. She was, and I need to say this word clearly for myself as much as for you, she was safe, physically unharmed. In the
people who would face consequences, I will let the courts name. My mother arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after the Garda. She came through the door of my room and she looked at me and at my son, and she sat on the edge of my bed, and she held me in the way that only a mother can hold you, the specific hold of someone whose love for you is older than your memory of it.
And she did not say anything for a long time. She just held on. My father came from Nairobi the next day. He walked into the room and he looked at me, the long, full look of a father taking inventory of a child he was afraid he might not see again. And he said in Swahili a word that translates approximately as, "You are here. You are here." And I said, "I am here." My daughter was brought to me 22 hours after she was found. A social worker, a Garda officer, a medical team, she arrived with proper accompaniment and proper care and was placed in my arms for the second time. The first time had been in an operating room with people who intended to take her. The second time was in a hospital bed with my mother on one side and my father on the other, and Brendan standing in the doorway looking at his shoes because he is a solicitor and they are not given to public emotion. I held her. I counted her fingers. I counted them twice. David is facing charges, multiple charges across multiple jurisdictions, because the network that he had connected this to was not local and not small, and the investigation has extended in directions that I was not aware of when it began, and that have taken considerable time to map. Dr. Harrington faces his own set of charges. Others face theirs. I will not say more than that because I have been asked not to, and because I have learned in the past year and a half that there are people whose safety depends on the careful management of what is said publicly and when. My marriage is over. I say this without elaboration because it requires none. The marriage ended the moment I read that message on his phone, or perhaps the moment he looked at me and said, "We only had one." Or perhaps, and this is the thought I come back to most frequently, perhaps the marriage ended at some point before any of that, in a moment I was not present for, when David made a decision that I know nothing about, because I was never part of the version of his life in which it was made. My children, both of them, are with me. They are a year and a half old. They do not know the story of their first 22 hours in the world, and they will not know it until they are ready to know it, which will be their decision to make in their own time. What they know now is this: their mother is always there, always present, always counting. My mother comes every month from County Clare. My father comes every 3 months from Nairobi. The house is full, regularly, of people who love these children with the specific, uncomplicated love of people who understand what was almost lost. My cousin Brendan comes for Sunday lunch when his schedule allows, and pretends he is coming for the food, which is fine. We let him pretend. I have thought a great deal about what kept me clear in those hours, about why I was able to hold on to what I knew when every authority around me was constructing an alternate reality with considerable professional skill. And the answer I keep arriving at is this: I knew what I had held. I knew the weight of her in my arms. I knew the sound of her cry. And no one, no physician, no husband, no nursing staff, no carefully managed hospital environment, no one can tell you that what you held in your arms was not real. They can say it. They can say it with complete authority and professional confidence and the full institutional weight of a medical setting behind them. But they cannot make it true. Because your hands remember. Your body remembers. The specific knowledge of having held a person is not something that can be reasoned away or medicated away or patiently managed away. I held her. I knew I held her. I did not stop knowing it for a single moment through every version of the reality they tried to construct around me. If you are listening to this right now, and I am speaking specifically now to any parent, any person who has been told that what they experienced is not real, that their knowledge of their own life is unreliable, that the evidence of their own senses and instincts and direct physical experience should be deferred to someone else's authority, I want to say this to you as directly as I know how to say anything. You know what you held. You know what you heard. You know what you saw. You know what happened in your own life and your own body and your own experience with a certainty that no external authority can actually supersede, no matter how confidently they present themselves. They can have titles and uniforms and institutional backing and the support of every person in the room. None of that makes your knowledge of your own experience wrong. Trust it. Document it. Get it to someone outside the room as fast as you can. Find your Brendan. Find the person outside the situation who will receive what you tell them without the first question being, "Are you sure?" And then hold on, for as long as it takes, with the specific, furious, unshakable clarity of a person who knows what they held. I held my daughter. She is asleep in the next room. Her brother is asleep beside her. My mother is downstairs making something that smells like County Clare. My father called this morning and we talked for an hour, and at the end he said in Swahili, "You are here." I said, "I am here." I am here. They are here. We held on. Thank you from every part of what I am, from the part that was alone in a hospital bed and the part that is here now. Thank you for listening to every single word of this. If this story reached somewhere real in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And please subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because the stories we tell here, the stories of people who held on when the world told them to let go, those stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe. It takes 1 second, and it means that stories like this one continue to reach the people who need them. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what you held on to when someone told you to let go. I will be reading. I always am.